Hey Merfolk fans, I'm Joe. Thanks very much for joining me today. If you'd like to support my channel and all these videos that I make, please check out the link above to my Patreon page. I'm here today with a replay of a modern friendly league, but before I jump in, I wanted to show you the deck list. It has one major difference from the list that I ran in my most recently uploaded league. I've substituted out all of the non-basics, except for Mutavault, for basic islands. So I had 2 Cavern of Souls, a Mutavault, and an Oboro. So subbed out 4 of those for 4 more basic islands. And the reason I outlined in a relatively sort of long post on the Merfolk subreddit is that Field of Ruin is all over the format. And it presents us as a monocolored deck with a real opportunity to gain significant percentage points against all of these decks running Field of Ruin. So I'm going to try to explain the ins and outs of this as quickly as I can. It's a little bit complicated, so please excuse me if I am a little bit long-winded. Basically, in the past, we've included cards like Wanderwine Hub, Oboro, Mutavault, in a general sense, in order to include some number of functional, non-basic blue sources to help us play around fringe things that might blow us out, like Choke and Boil, and the Mirror Match. We would like to keep the opponent off of Island Walk if possible, and non-basic blue sources allow us to play our game while achieving keeping them off of Island Walk. However, these scenarios are truly fringe in Modern right now. Choke and Boil, I did some math in the post on the subreddit. You can expect to see them, Choke in something like 1 in 1,000 matches, and Boil, I don't even know what the chances are. 1 in 5,000 matches. Pretty much nobody's playing Boil right now, and like 1% of the format has 2 Chokes in their sideboard or something like that. So the idea that we should be scared about Choke and Boil is a little bit silly. As for Merfolk itself, we are significantly below 1% of the metagame right now. I think if you add, according to MTG Goldfish, if you add Mono Blue and Tropical Merfolk together, you get something like 0.33 of 1% of the metagame. So again, the idea that you would have a single card in your 75 that cares about the Mirror Match directly, specifically, is totally misguided. It's 1/3 of 1%. So you should not be expecting to see Merfolk in competitive situations, which seems a little bit strange to say as a Merfolk pilot, but it's really just not something you should be worried about right now. So what you should be worried about is the nearly 20% of decks in Modern that are running Field of Ruin at an average of 3 copies. Blue-White Control is the second most popular deck in the format, and it runs a playset of Field of Ruin. Now, why is this important, and why does it affect the lands that we play? Well, in the past, as I mentioned, we played non-basic blue sources primarily as a defensive mechanism to sort of protect ourselves against potential blowouts. Running 16 islands against a field, a field that's running Field of Ruin, gives us a chance to blow out our opponent. If we can open a game with 2, 3, 4 basic islands, if the opponent kept a greedy opening hand with 1 colored source and a couple of Field of Ruin, expecting to basically use the Field of Ruin as a fetch land, they're going to be totally screwed on their mana, and we're going to be able to smoothly develop because we only need blue mana. So basically, my experience points to this being a strong strategy right now in the format. In just about 1 week, I've won 2 games solely on the back of this principle. I was still running Caverns and Mutavault and Oboro, but I happened to draw opening hands of just islands, and I just won a game against Jund, and against Black Green Rock, and a game against Blue White Control, because they kept these kinds of greedy hands with Field of Ruin and 1 colored mana source. So when I opened up with just islands, they were stuck with colored mana. I was able to just race out ahead of them, and they couldn't catch up. So I'd really strongly suggest trying running 16 islands. I guess one closing remark on our mana base is why we should not run Cavern of Souls. So as I mentioned, Blue-White Control is very popular, and as such, we should be expecting to see some number of counter spells. Now, blue-white control, they don't run a ton of counterspells, and we do have AEther Vial in the deck to begin with that helps us play around counterspells. Now, Cavern of Souls in the matchup is pretty weak for, well, basically the reason of Field of Ruin, but we can only effectively run maybe 2 Cavern of Souls right now because we're running basically Deprive, which is really blue mana intensive, and Cavern can't contribute to that. So if we ran a playset of Cavern of Souls, we would be getting screwed too often on Deprive. So basically we're running 2 Cavern of Souls and hoping to draw them against Control. But what happens is because Control plays a playset of Field of Ruin, they're drawing their Field of Ruin twice as often as we're drawing our Cavern of Souls. So if we do stick a Cavern of Souls, sure, we can at least resolve 1 Merfolk around counterspells before the opponent gets to blow up that land and turn it into a basic island. So in theory, getting some value out of the card. But number 1, you don't know if the opponent had a counterspell in hand at that moment. And number 2, if the opponent doesn't care about the Cavern of Souls, they don't need to target it with a Field of Ruin. They can just leave it there. Like, for example, if we have an AEther Vial out, then the opponent doesn't really care too much about the Cavern of Souls because we're going to be able to get creatures onto the board around counterspells anyway. They can pick and choose where they use their Field of Ruin, but more often than not, they have at least as many Field of Ruin as we play non-basics, you know? So we'll play a Cavern, they'll blow it up. We'll play a Mutavault, they'll blow it up. A much more effective strategy, if we look at the kind of percentage points that they're gaining us in the matchup, is I feel playing the 16 islands and just trying to totally turn off their Field of Ruin. As I mentioned, it's been effective for me so far, and I recommend that you guys try it as well and give me your feedback. Let me know if my logic seems sound. Let me know if you've had similar experiences or dissimilar experiences. And so with that mana base situation sort of explained, I'll just touch really quickly on the sideboard. I think I just replaced a couple Kiras with a couple Tidebinder Mages. There's a good amount of Burn and Humans and Jund running around, so I thought I'd give Tidebinder Mage a spin in this league. All right, so with that out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys the first round. All right, I'm here with a replay of Game 1 of Round 1 of this Modern Friendly League. Opponent won the die roll, but this is an excellent opening hand. Opponent kept their 7 as well. Celestial Colonnade, so there's that blue-white that I was talking about. We do have a couple basic islands that we could play. Opponent is leading on Serum Visions on turn 2, so we should see what they did with their Scry. Close that a little bit. Okay, they like the top 2 cards, but at this point, they don't really have a good sense of what I'm playing, so it's possible that they put cards that would be good against blue-white control on the top. Hallowed Fountain tapped, and drew another basic island, pretty decent. Go ahead and run out that Silvergill, get some value, draw a card. So Spreading Seas is an interesting card in the matchup. Obviously, we'd prefer not to have it in favor of better cards like Deprive in the matchup, but one of their big win conditions is Celestial Colonnade, so it's not totally a dead card, and it does sort of cycle itself, does replace itself. Opponent's passing the turn with 3 mana up, could mean any number of things. I'm just going to, on turn 3, get in with Silvergill to begin with, and see if the opponent would like to trade resources. Okay, they do not, so they take 2 points, and in my second main phase, since they have counter magic mana up, and Spreading Seas is sort of the least impactful card I think I have in hand, I think I'm going to go ahead and cast Spreading Seas. And since they've got their mana developed, it's fine now to play out a Mutavault. If they have a Field of Ruin, yes, it can trade with the Mutavault, but in the event that they don't have Field of Ruin, I can actually get some value out of Mutavault. So let's go ahead and target the Celestial Colonnade. Opponent lets it resolve. And I continue drawing more gas. So, okay, opponent's going with Click here, and I don't know if they want to take anything. The hand is extremely redundant. Obviously, it's a little bit weak to Detention Sphere, but I think main deck, they might run 1 at most, Detention Sphere. Now, Vendilion Click, I don't think is extremely common in the most competitive blue-white lists right now. But there's a lot of different variants of the deck around, so I'm not surprised to see Vendilion Click. All right, so since I have so many lords, I think I'm going to try to run 1 out. And from here, I think I'll just go to combat with Silvergill Adept. Now, it's possible that the opponent has something like Snapcaster and a Path from Master, but they wouldn't get any value out of the Snapcaster since there's only a Serum Visions, and it's my turn, and that's a sorcery speed effect. They're going to use a Path on Silvergill, so the fact that they used one of their removal spells on a relatively inconsequential creature like Silvergill that has already replaced itself seems to indicate that they might have a Snapcaster in hand, so they can just get more value out of Path to Exile, so they're just trying to slow me down. At this point, I'd really like to get the Vial down. We've got so many creatures in our hand. Opponent opts in response. We can see if they went to the top or the bottom, and they went to the bottom. Okay, so they're cracking, tapped Hallowed Fountain, and that Path has ramped me nicely. I have access to 4 islands to play out whatever I want next turn. Opponent plays a land. It's going to continue getting in with Vendilion Clique. Now, this is a slightly more aggressive take on blue-white control. Typically, they'll try to control the game through the first 10 turns and then start attacking you with Celestial Colonnade once they've totally ground you out. In this case, they're just getting in with the flyer, and they're currently kind of winning the race. But with this Aether Vial ticking up, I'm going to be pulling ahead in tempo pretty quickly, I think. So again, they're just choosing to leave up mana. So what's the best play here? It seems to me that running out a Reejerey is okay. I'm still ahead on cards. I've got 5 cards in hand. So the opponent is going to counter and draw. So this is a really strong way that blue-white control has of pulling ahead in the card advantage race. They get to counter one of my spells and draw a card. So at this point, they've pulled ahead by 1 card, and since they only have 1 mana up here, I'm going to go ahead and cast Spreading Seas, hopefully resolve it, and just constrain their white mana if possible. It was the only spell after Reejerey that I could actually cast, given the mana that I left up. And another Spreading Seas is really interesting. As I mentioned, it's not a card that we really want in the deck against this matchup, but the opponent only has 1 more white source, so we can potentially back them into a corner with this next Spreading Seas. So opponent continuing to keep their nose ahead in this damage race. I'm at 11. We'll tick Aether Vial up to 2, and the first play I'm going to make for the turn is Spreading Seas targeting the Hallowed Fountain. It is going to put the opponent on the spot. They have a Cryptic Command in the graveyard, and it's totally possible that they, as I mentioned, have a Snapcaster in hand because they cast that Path to Exile so casually earlier. And with 6 mana up, they could do Snapcaster Cryptic Command, and I'd much rather they kind of waste their Cryptic Command on a Spreading Seas than on one of my creatures. So that was how I read it, and that's actually how it played out. It looks like they're going to counter and draw, getting a ton of value out of Cryptic Command, but sort of playing into my plan here, because I can just Vial in another Island Walklord. Now, this was a misplay on my part. The opponent knew that I had these 3 Island Walklords, I think from the Vendilion Clique, the Master of the Pearl Trident. He didn't know that I had Lord of Atlantis, so I was thinking in this sort of split second between when I activated Aether Vial and actually clicked on a creature, I was thinking that I should play the creature that he has information about. The potential downside of that is that the opponent does play Detention Sphere. So even though he didn't have information about this Island Walklord, it would have been a stronger play to play this guy and keep his Detention Sphere off extra value. So we get to get in for 7 with Island Walk, effectively cutting the opponent's life total in half. Okay, so there's a Detention Sphere. Taking care of both of my lords, but I've still got tons of gas in hand. Opponent can get in for 5. They've only got 2 mana. Well, no, 3 mana up now, but they tap their only white source to cast Detention Sphere. Okay, I'm gonna tick Aether Vial up here. bring in Reejerey, and I'm going to cast one of these lords. And one of the things about tapping up, trying to tap opponents' lands is that it can make them uncomfortable and make them do things they don't really have to do. So I'm not trying to play out all these creatures in my hand this turn. You don't want to overextend against decks that can top deck like Terminus or just play Supreme Verdict or anything like that. So I want to use this Reejerey value to just try to push the opponent's buttons a little bit. So he floated blue mana. I'm going to tap the other island. Not sure if he has something to use this blue mana on or not, but he goes ahead and plays out the Snapcaster. Now, that ended up not really having a big effect. He can only target Opt in the graveyard right now. But it's possible that the opponent might have wanted to save the Snapcaster to use Path to Exile, but because I was pressuring his lands, it's possible that he may have felt obligated to use Snapcaster right now. Like, it's obviously not with a way to play. Like, if he doesn't have another Snapcaster in hand to get value off that Path to Exile, there's really no reason to bring the Snapcaster in now. But again, pressuring his lands might have made him do that. So against opponents who are not necessarily the best in the world, you can get percentage points through those kinds of weird plays with Merrow Reejerey. I'm going to try to get in here with 5 with Mutavault. I do. The opponent goes down to 3, and they're going to cast that Opt. Let's see what they ended up doing with it. They put it on the bottom and drew a card. So we do get to tick AEther Vial up to 4 next turn, which makes Mutavault by itself lethal. So even Terminus or Supreme Verdict here doesn't really matter if the opponent doesn't have any other play, because I get to Vial in Master of Waves and attack for 3 next turn. Opponent played a Flooded Strand and actually cracked it, so now Mutavault's lethal by itself. All right, so with 4 cards in hand, opponent gets in with his whole team, which is actually lethal. I'm at 6. I do need to line up some kind of blocks. This appears to me to possibly be like a Hail Mary attack before a Wrath. But the opponent's dead to Mutavault, so that doesn't really make sense. But I'm dead if I don't block, so I chose to put 2 Lords in front of the Snapcasters in order to actually kind of blow me out here. If you think about what needs to happen, he needs to have, I guess, 2 pieces of removal. So he'd kill this guy with a Path, and maybe kill this guy with a Path, in which case this guy becomes a 2/2 and dies. The opponent is still at 2. I could still win with Mutavault, so I don't really see any risk to blocking like this. Opponent does have 1 Path. Gets me another basic island, and both of his Snapcasters die. Opponent appears to have a follow-up. So here's Jace. Now, he could bounce one of my Lords, which would kill the other Lord. But again, I'd still be left with a Mutavault on the table, which is lethal by itself. And I could, of course, just play out the other Lord for Island Walk or for buffs with Reejerey. The opponent decided to brainstorm, since I guess he thought that bouncing a Lord was a losing line with Mutavault on the table. Passes the turn. I'm going to tick up AEther Vial. Drew a Harbinger, just more gas. Actually, kind of a good draw because it protects my life total. If he attacked with Vendilion Click, I could just instant speed, try to bounce it and get another turn. But the opponent just scooped there. So I feel like we navigated that round pretty clearly, pretty cleanly. Opponent appeared to make a couple of missteps. When I mentioned him running out that Snapcaster to cast Opt with Path to Exile in the graveyard, it appears he did not have an extra Snapcaster after that. So it could be that I pressured him into casting that Snapcaster by tapping his lands with Reejerey. So I don't know, something to learn from that maybe. Let's go ahead and look at round 2. It's not round 2, but game 2 and the sideboard. All right, back for game 2. Let's check out how the sideboard looked. Took out all 4 Harbingers. There's not really a lot of stuff to bounce. Took out all 4 Spreading Seas. So that's 8 cards out. And the 8 cards that I brought in were 4 Deprive, 2 Relic, Actually, I have a Negate in the board also. So I think I brought in 4 Deprive and the 1 Negate. I can check that actually. Yeah, so I would have brought in 4 Deprive, 1 Negate, 2 Relics, and maybe 1 Echoing Truth? Not exactly sure. Let's go back to our window over here. Yeah, that looks exactly right. So against blue-white control, I think having access to 1 Echoing Truth is smart because they can land Stony Silence, which can be a pain in certain draws. They can play Detention Sphere, which we can bounce and get value before they can replay it. So again, 5 counter spells, 2 relics, 1 Echoing Truth. Now the reason I don't bring in all the relics is because they can bring in Stony Silence, and we don't want to have too many dead draws. So in this matchup, I think 2 relics is correct. So that out of the way, let's go ahead and see how this round went. So this is a keep. We need more blue mana. The opponent kept as well. I have to say, at the beginning of this league here in round 1, that Phantasmal Image has made for some extremely entertaining magic in past couple weeks that I've been playing it. Being able to copy any of the creatures in our deck is great, but there's so many circumstances where copying an opponent's creature is amazing. So unfortunately in this matchup, there's not a lot of creatures we can really copy with Phantasmal Image, so it's going to typically copy a Lord, but we like having Lords in hand, so feel pretty good about the Phantasmal Image. So another Deprive is excellent, but we really need to start drawing more blue sources. The opponent leads with Opt on turn 2, puts it on the bottom, plays a Field of Ruin. So you can see immediately I'm presented with a game where Field of Ruin is super relevant. If I had just islands to play out here, I have 16 islands in the deck for this reason, the opponent would not be able to activate this and could potentially be stuck on colored mana sources. Let's see what their next land drop is. So again, a colorless mana source. Now, Ghost Quarter can convert another land, like he could Ghost Quarter his own Field of Ruin to get another colored source, but it's currently stuck on just this 1 Hallowed Fountain. So just worth noting that situations like I outlined in my deck tech just a moment ago come up pretty frequently, where opponents keep hands like this with 1 colored source and a bunch of Field of Ruins. So a very, very slow opening. Opponent's not casting anything. I'm not casting anything. Fortunately, I drew an island right on time. And I'm going to take advantage of the fact that the opponent doesn't have double blue if they want to cast. Maybe they're playing, I think, Logic Knot. They could have Mana Leak or something, but Merrow Reejerey resolves. They certainly don't have Cryptic Mana, nowhere near it. And the opponent's going to take this opportunity to destroy my Mutavault. And that will give me another basic island, which I quite enjoy, because I've got these double Deprive, I've got a couple of Master of the Pearl Trident, so that Mutavault wasn't really helping me in that spot. The opponent misses their 4th land drop. And with all this gas in hand, I think the play is to cast a Lord and try to untap a land and hold up Deprive. Opponent does have double blue now, but no Cryptic Mana again, so I can go to attacks and see if they have anything. All right, they didn't have anything, and I think holding up Deprive is good here. If they do hit a land, they could go for Jace or something, and we can counter that. They're going to go to Opt on their end step, my end step. And they topped 1, so seems like it's probably a land. Okay. Now it seems like they're passing with Cryptic Mana. So rather than cast a spell and give them the opportunity to counter and tap my team, I think it makes more sense just to go straight to combat. Of course, they could have some good stuff. They've got white mana and a couple of other blue sources, but we're just going to get in here with both guys. Okay, so path on the Lord. With double Deprive, I feel fine countering this path. This is actually a great opportunity to talk about potential upside with Deprive. Its extra cost says return a land you control. Now, I don't have a land drop to make this turn, but if I Deprive this path to exile, and pick up my land, I get to play it again and then use that mana. So I'm going to be able to effectively use 4 mana this turn. They're going to counter this Path to Exile. Maybe the opponent has a counter. Looks like maybe they do. Oh, but it's Vendilion Clique. So this is interesting because what do they think of my hand here? I've got so much going on. They could take anything or not take anything. So, I mean, it seems like a good choice is Deprive, right? It's kind of an excellent card against control if they try to land Teferi or a Cryptic Command. So he did take the Deprive. It replaced itself with an AEther Vial. The path is going to get countered. And it seems like the clear play here, having already gotten value with Vendilion Clique, is to trade with my Island Walk Lord. The opponent hasn't really shown himself to be the most savvy. So I guess he felt like he needed a clock. So he did not block the Master of the Pearl Trident. He did see the Phantasmal Image in my hand, so it's a possibility now I can copy the click and take away whatever great card the opponent has been waiting to get to, struggling with his land drops. After bouncing it with Deprive, I get to play my island back out, and I think that seems like a great play, actually. Though copying Lords is really great, Control has so many filler cards, like Serum Vision and random counter spells and things like that, that if they have one big payoff card like Teferi, I'd like to get that out of their hand. Also gives me a way to trade with their Vendilion Clique. So I got to see their hand, and it was a pretty amazing hand. Had to be thankful that they were a little slow on their mana development. So they've got 2 double white spells in their hand, but Control plays like 24 or 25 lands, and they've got a Ghost Quarter if they want to go get another white source by destroying one of their islands. So we will have to worry about these white spells down the road. Double Snapcaster with Settle and Cryptic is really daunting because they can cast Cryptic, tap my team. If they continue to develop their lands, they can snap Cryptic, tap my team again, snap Cryptic, tap my team again. Or they can Settle the Wreckage, kill some number of my creatures, and then Snapcaster Settle again. Makes it really hard to attack into the opponent. So I really don't have a way of dealing with Baneslayer Angel in the deck. I can hope to draw 4 Tricksters and just sort of fog him for a few turns, or her, I guess. So I chose to ship away the Baneslayer Angel. At this point, we do have information of 4 cards in the opponent's hand. The only card we don't know is the card that Vendilion Clique's ability just replaced. So no Wraths in the opponent's hand, except for the Settle, which is the fact that we know about it makes it not really a Wrath. Opponent top decked a land there, or it's possible they got it off the Vendilion Clique. So very happy that they don't have access to that Baneslayer Angel. Opponent chose not to attack with their Vendilion Clique. I still have access to value with Merrow Reejerey. And I think it makes sense to go for value with Silvergills here. Just try to replace them. Develop my board while also drawing cards. Another Reejerey, pretty nice. We've got so much gas in hand. Now, we know 4 of the 5 cards in hand, and he's got a path in the graveyard. So we could see something like a Snap Path. I don't really want to make hasty attack here. So it seems like playing another Island Walk Lord would be decent to try to shore up our evasive abilities. So the opponent tapped my team and countered the Island Walk Lord. So very defensive play by the opponent. I can't say it's a bad play. Seems pretty solid, countering an Island Walk Lord. We'll play out this AEther Vial, which should hopefully help us develop in the next few turns. We can close this Cryptic command. We have to try to remember that he's got a Path and a Cryptic in the graveyard with 2 Snapcasters. We have to be very careful playing around the Settle the Wreckage. So the opponent has a 6th land, which now effectively turns on Snap 4-drop. So Snap Cryptic, Snap Settle. So the opponent gets to start his clock ticking here. He's going to be able to fog me for a couple of turns, maybe more than a couple. So here, I think it's time to play out another Island Walk Lord, again, attempting to improve our Island Walk, make it more robust through Path to Exile. And knowing about the Settle the Wreckage, I'm just going to get in with my two least important creatures, which are actually punching pretty hard with all these lords on the table. So Silvergill and Vendilion Click. I'm not sure what the play is here. The opponent can like Snapcaster Path the Silvergill, or they can Settle the Wreckage here. There's a few options. Okay, so we're seeing Settle the Wreckage. Having known about it was really, really important. I would not have played around this card if I didn't know about it, because it's really not played in blue-white right now. I actually checked this the other day. Out of the last 25 results, I think, for blue-white control, there's something like 0.4 of a copy on average of Settle the Wreckage in the 75 between sideboard and main deck. So there's not even half a copy on average of Settle the Wreckage. So it's not something you really should play around unless you really can easily do so. So I get to get two basic islands. Helps our development a little bit more. And I'm going to play a Silvergill here. Again, just get more bodies onto the table. We know exactly what the opponent's working with. So seems like playing around Path to Exile and Settle the Wreckage, having more bodies is better. And Trickster is nice because it can help us deal with this Vendilion Click. Okay, so opponent continues to play lands. We know he has the two Snapcasters still, so he's going to be able to blank our attack. So that's all he does on his turn. Take AEther Vial up to 2, and we continue to draw really well. I think I'm going to try to cast a Reejerey here. And again, try to mess with the opponent's mana a bit. Now, he doesn't necessarily need to respond, but we did see him respond last game. So he's going to snap and target Cryptic here. So the fact that the opponent has countered a couple of my creatures could serve as evidence that Cavern of Souls is good in the matchup. But remember, he's had a Ghost Quarter sitting up forever. So if I had a Cavern, he would just be able to Ghost Quarter it. I think it's much more effective just to play the basic islands. We already saw, I think it was the beginning of this very game, where the opponent could have been kept from playing Magic if I had just basic islands. So I still feel really good about just playing basic islands. Looks like the opponent is going to counter the Reejerey and tap my team. Now, I'm not going to untap the opponent's Hollow Fountain. This is a really cool opportunity because I can now play a Lord, untap Silvergill as my biggest body. And let's see, we know now just he has one more Snapcaster in hand, so odds are he doesn't have another path. Possibly does. But if he wants to use that path on Silvergill, that's fine with me. I'm going to try to get in for 6 here. So I'm not sure I completed my thought with Reejerey here. So once the opponent taps your team, if you have another Merfolk, you can cast it and then untap one of your creatures. So by trying to cast a Merfolk in my main phase, tapping one of the opponent's lands, it made them jump the gun with the Cryptic. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They do have 7 lands. They could have just let me tap that land. When I went to the beginning of combat, they could have tapped my team, in which case, since it's beginning of combat, I couldn't cast a creature because obviously you can only do that during main phases, and I wouldn't be able to attack with Silvergill right now. So we can tell that for sure at this point that the opponent is a little bit intimidated by Reejerey targeting his lands, when really the effect should be almost meaningless. So let's see, what can the opponent do at this point? We know he has access to Settle the Wreckage and Path to Exile in the graveyard, neither of which is super helpful. But since he knows he can fog our attack with Settle, he's going to get in with Click here. We're going to bring in Trickster and take away Flying. Double blocking seems smart here because we don't want him to be able to path whichever blocker we put in front and let the Vendilion Click live. So in this case, even if he paths one of our blockers, Click is going to die. I don't think the opponent enjoyed that very much because I take AEther Vial up and he just scooped as soon as I went to my main phase. So that a pretty great match against blue-white control. Got to demonstrate a little bit how Field of Ruin can play in the early part of the game, where the opponent could have been screwed on mana if we were able to just play out islands. Adding, I think, further support to my point that basic islands are really good right now in the metagame. Phantasmal Image, once again, making for very exciting magic. We got to copy the opponent's Vendilion Click and ship away a Baneslayer Angel, which is pretty awesome. We played through multiple Snapcasters, Cryptics, and Settle the Wreckage. So please let me know your thoughts on the match. Please let me know your thoughts on the whole mana base issue. Subscribe if you haven't already. Please check out my Patreon page if you'd like to support my channel. And that's it. I'll see you guys in the next video for round 2. Bye.